Hello, hello. So the number of participants is stabilizing, so I think we will start. So thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us to this sustainability webinar number 2. If you were there last week, welcome back. And if you're new, welcome. Again, it's a pleasure to see many people interested in sustainability, and especially in the environmental footprint of IT. So I hope you will enjoy it as well, gain insights, and we will deliver value through this webinar. That leads me to our agenda. So last week, as I said, we had Miguel who explained us the energy and climate crisis. Today, we are lucky to have Olivier Vergeynst, director at Green IT Belgium, and he will explain us the environmental footprint of IT services and how you can reduce it in your company. Which is a topic that will become more and more important with the increased digitalization of our world. And then in 2 days, next Thursday, we will have Pascal Durdu, who will explain us how to put the circular economy in practice for businesses. So that's a great program. You are all automatically registered for the last webinar next Thursday, and you will receive a reminder through mail 1 day and 1 hour before. Be sure to not miss it. A few settings about this webinar. So we'll do a 40 to 45 minutes presentation and 15 to 20 minutes Q&A. If you have any question during the presentation, please post them in the section of Q&A in Zoom. It should be at the bottom. There you can post your question and we will go through them, scroll to them at the end of the webinar. It's also possible for attendees to upvote questions and comments on questions, so we can see the most interesting one who will come on top of the list. And again, of course, I think you understand that all attendees are muted by default for the experience of everyone. If you have any problems, technical issues during the webinar, just send me a message in the chat. You can address a message directly to the panelists. So Arthur, myself, will try to support you if you have any issue. A few words about Bright Wolves, who is organizing those sustainability webinars. So we are management consulting companies. We specialize into bridging the gap between strategy and implementation, and we offer services to our customers in the 4 pillars you see in front of you. We do so in strategy and finance, organization and operations, digital transformation, and data-driven solution. So we support our customer in that transformation. And lately we focus on a new transformation, the sustainable business transformation, which is creating sustainable value. What is sustainable value? This is engagement value, economic value, and environmental value. And I think Olivier will tell us more about creating environmental value and economic value, of course, from IT systems. So Olivier, the floor is yours. You can share your screen, and everybody enjoy this webinar.
Thank you very much. Let me start the sharing of the screen, and I hope that the sound is okay. Let us know through the chat in case the sound is really causing any issue. And in theory, you should see the first slide where I introduce myself. So my name is Olivier Vergeynst. Thank you to Bright Wolves for organizing the sessions. I will talk to you today about Green IT Belgium and what is Green IT, how you can use it in your company. First of all, a quick word of introduction about myself. I've been working as an IT director in various companies, amongst others, mainly Euroclear and Ingenico. I've been in charge of various IT departments, IT operations, infrastructure, development, application development, various roles like that. So I've got a fairly good knowledge of the different types of activities in IT world, also international settings and teams in various countries. I realized only lately, in fact, the size of the magnitude of the impact of the environmental impact of IT. And at that stage, I decided to fund Green IT Belgium to try to help companies to reduce their footprint, actually. So what will we see today? First of all, I'll bring you through these environmental impacts, which for me were a bit of a surprise. I knew about data centers and stuff like that, but it was fairly limited to that. I didn't know it was that large. So I'll introduce you to these impacts, and then I'll give you some hints and tips about how to reduce them. in your company, also personally in your personal and professional life. And then I'll try to show you some additional benefits that you can gain at company level by adopting the best practices of Green IT. And a short slide at the end, in case you are interested to adopt all these best practices. I'll show you very briefly what you can do there. So let's get started. As you know, we are facing the COVID-19 at the moment, and we are trying to flatten the curve. The thing is that it's only a start, I think, compared to all the major changes that are coming. So the idea through this presentation will be to look at IT level. What can we do to flatten the curve of business impacts on the planet? So I'll have you to work in a couple of minutes. We will introduce you through a poll, a small survey. Let me first give you a few background information before asking you a question. So depending on the studies, there are various numbers. It ranges from 10 to 12 to 15 tons of CO2 emissions, CO2 equivalent emissions per year per person in Belgium, France, etc. So let's take 12 for the exercise here. And to give you a point of comparison for IT, I look at transport. Transport, we have roughly 3 tons, so 2.9 tons of CO2 emissions per year, of which you've got 400 kilos for the car manufacturing and 1.5 tons that are related to your usage of the car. Then you've got 500 kilos coming from planes, 400 coming from freight, and 100 kilo coming from other transports like buses, trains, etc. These give you different ranges. So now we will put a question for you about your usage of digital technologies. What do you think are the emissions linked to your usage of IT? And so if Arthur can show the poll, perfect, it's there. So you can choose between 100 kilo, 500 kilo, 1,500 kilo, and 2,500 kilo. We'll leave the poll open for a couple of, a few seconds until Arthur says that we've got the right number of respondents. And then we'll go through that. So you can see a point of comparison and answer what you think is relevant. And so here are the results. And we see that 49% answered 1.5 tons, which is the correct answer. I think it's the first time that I've got the correct answer in this poll at the moment, so that's good. But we see that a quarter of the respondents are thinking it's 500 kilo or even less, and almost a quarter are thinking it's almost 2.5 tons. So anyway, the majority is on the right value. For the average population, it's 1.2, which includes all the children, retired people, etc. But if we take employees and people in the service industry using more of IT services probably than the rest of the population, it's about 1.5 tons indeed. And let's take a simple example to illustrate that website. So here you see RTL and VRT. I'll take VRT for the example here. This one, it's probably a bit small to see, but on the ecoindex.fr, you can test a page, one page at a time, and it will give you various information. First of all, the rating from A to G, like you have for your fridge, A++, etc. But a bit below that, it shows the equivalent, the CO2 emissions for that page. That's an estimation for the whole usage of that single page. And you see that for the homepage of VRT, it's 2.59 grams of CO2, not much. This said, the thing is that this page is viewed 18 million times per month. So when you multiply that, and this is just the homepage, when you multiply that, you've got 47 tons of CO2 per month. And that equates to roughly 12,000 kilometers per day by car. That is massive for just one homepage. You haven't seen any video, you haven't seen any article yet. This is just the views for that homepage of VRT. And if we look at the top 20 sites, Belgian sites, just the homepage again, we reach a bit more than 200,000 kilometers per day. That is just massive carbon footprint coming from our websites. I'm not even talking about Facebook, YouTube, etc. But this gives you an idea that even in Belgium we can do something. And I love this picture from Spirou magazine. Robert Douce, in Dutch. So yeah, who is this carbon footprint coming from? So overall, the IT industry emits more greenhouse gas emissions now than the airline industry, civil aviation. If you look at the graph there, we are roughly at 4%. That is the green line. And you see that it's increasing very fast. It's increasing by 9% per year. I would say at the moment, the airline industry is not the one increasing, but clearly the IT continues to increase. But the impact is not limited to greenhouse gas emissions. It is also related to natural resources. And we see through this life cycle graph, the first step is the pre-manufacturing, so the extraction of resources. Second step is manufacturing, that's mainly assembly of all the parts. Distribution, transport, use, that's usage, electricity, etc. And then disposal is the end of life, where it usually ends up, unfortunately, on landfills. And the different bars that you see for each of these steps are the different types of toxicity, pollution, usage of natural resources, etc. And you see clearly that the first step has the biggest impact. This is for a PC, manufacturing and usage of a PC, but it is broadly similar for the different types of equipment, laptops, screens, all the end users equipment. So you can see that the impact, especially in terms of natural resources, is very big at that stage. And to show you, especially for metals, minerals, rare earth, the impact is really large. This is a study from McKinsey with a US university. We can't really say that McKinsey is known to be the most ecologically careful company, maybe. It's not like Greenpeace or something like that. So they are really looking at the economical aspect. And what you see on this graph is that the top 7 roughly metals are there for one more generation, and then we will run out of these metals. Then the next 6 or so are there for a second generation, and the next 10 maximum are there for 3 generations. All these metals like gold, nickel, silver, etc., copper, all these metals are used not only for IT, but also for all the renewable energy, for the electric cars, for medical equipment like X-ray machines, etc. And so we are really running fast out of such resources. And personally, I would prefer to still have enough resources to have medical equipment in 2 generations than to be sure that everyone has the latest generation of iPhone. So just a reflection, think about the usage that you are making. Of course, we know that the technology will continue to evolve. We will probably find additional resources, etc. Nevertheless, 10 to 12 years, for example, of the first one is really minimum amount of years for such resources. So the consumption of these resources and the overall impact of IT, where does it come from? And this is the second question that will come to you in a second. So you see that we've got a 3-tier approach. We've got user equipment. So that's your screen, laptop, security camera at home, watch, anything that is a user equipment, network, and data centers. Where do you think lies the biggest source of impact between these 3? And I let you vote. I'm voting myself at the same time. A couple more seconds, I think. And there come the result. Data center 68%, end user equipment 26%, and network. Let me show you the correct answer. I'm closing that one on the side. Let me show you that. Up. End user equipment. You see the majority of the impact comes from there. Data center is really the third, actually. Everyone thinks about data center, but there's a good reason why the impact comes from end user equipment. The number of equipment is just enormous. In 2019, the estimation is that we had 34 billion end user equipment, roughly 1.3 billion network equipment, and we're talking about a few million servers in total. So the servers are running 24 hours by 7, etc. But their usage is shared between so many end users. While your screen, your laptop, your iPad, your phone, your anything, all the equipment that you have is only used by yourself or maybe a couple of other people in your family or something like that. We have, on average, on Earth, around 8 equipment per person. And in countries like Belgium, France, etc., it's closer to 30 equipment per person. And if you think about all the things that you have at home, it can be, as I said, security cameras, it can be sensors that you have for the heating, it can be anything like that. They are all connected equipment. And manufacturing all these equipment is what has the biggest impact before the usage because of the electricity. So I saw the question coming, what is ADP? ADP is the abiotic resource depletion, and this is the usage of natural resources. It's the way to measure natural resources. It's measured against the antimony, which is the first of the metals that I showed in the graph from McKinsey, because it's a way to show how fast it will disappear. But so you see that user equipment, for all the types of impact that IT can have, is the biggest in terms of source. And I mentioned that it was mainly coming from the manufacturing. It's seen again in this study dating from end of last year. The manufacturing of the end user equipment is really what has the biggest impact, especially for resources and for water. A bit more equal for the greenhouse gas emissions, and then in terms of primary energy, which is the one used actually both for the usage, electricity, etc., but also for all the diesel needed to extract all the natural resources, etc. There you see that we have use and manufacturing at the same level. And what we see is that there's a strong evolution for between 2010 and 2025, the estimations of evolution of impact. The 3 new trends are the television sets, the smartphones, and the connected objects, so Internet of Things, as we also say. Mainly that one is increasing tremendously. It was almost non-existent 10 years ago, and it becomes between 18 to 23% of impact in a couple of years from now. But you see that all these are increasing a lot. Television set, the increase comes mainly because we are replacing television sets too fast, and the size of the screen has more than doubled in 10 years already. The same for smartphones. We are at the limit of, we have a full market of smartphones already in Europe mainly, and United States and most countries of Asia. But the thing is that the size of the screen has continued to increase. And also at world level, the number of countries, developing countries equipping themselves is also increasing. So these are the 3 new sources of impact. In the past, before 2010, it was mainly the computers, the laptops, the PC screens, etc., that were creating the majority of the impact on end user equipment. So the problem that I found when I started to look for information, for reliable information about the environmental impact of IT, is that there's quite a lot of greenwashing and incorrect information in the media. So the first thing that I did before really opening the service of Green IT Belgium was to create a network to gain as much expertise as possible. So the first part was with France. You see that the top part of the screen shows all the French different types of communities that we have there, and they have been active for almost 15 years already in Green IT, which is not at all the case of the other countries in Europe, not at that level. We've got people. The first box is about people who are contributing as benevolent, so for free to spread the information, correct information, the knowledge, etc. They are led by greenit.fr, and especially Frédéric Bordage is really leading the efforts there. He also created what used to be called the Club Green IT, which is now the Institut Numérique Responsable. This one is more the professional side of user companies. So you can see a few examples there, like SNCF, Renault, Pôle emploi, Decathlon, Société Générale. These companies are not providers of IT services as such, except of course their websites, etc. They are users of IT to deliver their services. And so they came together to learn about the best practices, to share between them all this information, and they are sharing it with us as well. We are member of the Institut Numérique Responsable, they are a member of Green IT Belgium as well. And then there is also some other in France, like also in the rest of Europe. We've got different European associations. Those there's a slight risk of greenwashing there because it's mainly about IT providers like data centers, etc. So we must always be careful about the information that is given, but nevertheless, it is important to know what exists as different types of offering. For example, you've got data centers that are also doing cogeneration, so generating energy, reusing the heat, for example, to heat the heat of the data centers to heat swimming pools or buildings or stuff like that. And this information is really interesting to know. And then we work with universities, at the moment we started with Louvain, then Namur, Liège, Brussels, starting one at a time. We are moving now towards the VUB, and then Ghent, Antwerp, and so on. Also trying to look at the other type of aspects that we can have. So Climate, for example, they are helping the government and also European Commission, etc., providing advice to several companies about carbon footprint, generally speaking, not at all IT only. DAPESCO is about the energy used by companies. Justice EP is about the impact, the social impact of extraction of minerals. And we're also working with circular IT in Belgium and Europe. And I'll show you a bit more what I mean by circular IT. But again, the idea there is to know what exists and how you can, as a company, use these services to reduce your own footprint. So having a quick look at the questions as I speak, how many people on the planet have access to computers, TVs, and other devices? It is already enormous. It is between 4 and 5 billion at the moment, and plan to increase above 6 billion by 2025. So I'll continue, and I'll wait for the other questions that you may have. In terms of actions now, what can you do? The first step I mentioned is really about the creation, the manufacturing of equipment. So the problem is about avoiding wasted equipment, and this is one of the circular IT companies that I mentioned, which is doing statistics about what they can source as laptops, and they are saying that every day we manufacture 450,000 laptops in the world. And of those, just in Europe, we dispose of 160,000 laptops, of which 70% are still usable one way or another. That is just massive. And you have to know that despite all the Recupel and so on in Belgium and in the equivalent in Europe, the vast majority of it goes into landfills in Ghana and into various types of traffic. There's massive traffic run by different mafia about how is it called again? WEEE, so the waste of electrical and electronical equipment. And even Interpol is really fighting against that. Depending on the estimations, Interpol estimates that more than 65% of our waste of electronical equipment goes to Africa, and Greenpeace estimates that it goes up to 90%, despite all the collect that we can do. So what can you do against that? There's something very simple, actually. You can extend the life of your equipment either internally or externally. The first thing is internally. When you buy something, you can train your purchasers so that they will be able to buy something that is repairable. I'm showing here the example of a Fairphone. It's maybe not the best phone that you may have, but at least it gives the idea. This is the most repairable phone that you can think of. The same applies to computers, to laptops, etc. We train people to identify what is more easily repairable. It means that you can repair it internally if you have the people to do it, or at least it means that in case it doesn't work anymore, you can give it to a company who will be able to refurbish it and transform it into, give it a second life. And circular economy comes there. This is the example of a smart world. They are based in Genval here in near Brussels. They recuperate smartphones mainly from companies, but also from private individuals. And they refurbish them professionally and resell them. So all is done in Belgium, the refurbishing as well as reselling, with a warranty, of course. So it creates local job and it avoids the trafficking of waste. And we've got the same for computers. For example, comics. There's also another one, slightly different type of business model, which is Close the Gap, probably more known than comics. But what they do is that they recuperate the laptops from companies and give them again a second life. And in the case of comics or circular computing, for example, they provide laptops that really look like brand new because they've been completely remanufactured. It's very difficult actually to see that it's a remanufactured one, I can tell you. And they resell that with a 2 to 3 years warranty, possibly depending on the contract that you have with them. Is there lobbying to force manufacturers to make repairable equipment? That's a good question. Actually, there's a bit of both. There's probably more lobbying from manufacturers to avoid having to make it repairable equipment. Now, there's also more and more people putting pressure on companies to the point that, for example, HP has started to invest in circular computing. They are at the board of circular computing, I think, to look at how to transform their laptops into something that can be refurbished. And it's interesting to see because Dell, for example, is the easiest to refurbish. If you look at the main ones for companies, it's Dell, HP, and Apple, which are mostly sold. Dell is easier to refurbish than HP, which is much easier than Apple. And so there's a pressure on HP to become more easy to refurbish. The thing for me, when you think about second-hand equipment, everyone says, yeah, but I'm kind of afraid of a second-hand smartphone, etc. Well, you would not be too afraid to buy a second-hand car. Maybe you already have a second-hand car, or you bought one for your kids or something. And this one is very risky because you're driving, it's your life in the car. You're driving that car on the motorway, 120 kilometers an hour. The personal risk on the laptop is much smaller than the car. So maybe it's just a question of getting used to such use, second life of equipment. Coming back to a smart world just for a second, they are currently running with the COVID-19. They are currently running a special exercise, which is to deliver refurbished smartphones to des maisons de retraite, so retirement houses. So that the elderly can get again a video call with their families. And I know that, for example, circular, Close the Gap is doing something similar, mainly with the computers to equip students in Flanders. So there's really a second life that you can give to your equipment, and at the moment it's really used a lot. So there's a question there which is more difficult to answer. Even though there's the you mentioned 70% of the laptops are going to Ghana. So WEEE is the waste electrical equipment, etc. That is simply the fact that we, at the end of life, we dump it. Even if it's still working, we dump it. And the statistics based on the weight of all these machines is that they are not recuperated at the end, they are not recycled. And we see that roughly 70% in terms of weight disappears. And we know that the majority ends up in Ghana, and you can see quite a lot of documentaries on the pollution that you have in Ghana and the extreme social impact that it has also on these populations. But yeah, these are not statistics that I'm making. As I said, for example, Interpol is also explaining that in their reports. Moving on to what else can you do than the hardware? The first step is about the software, quite simply. And that can be your website, as I mentioned already, but also all the applications. And usually I ask one more question, but because of time, we will skip that one. So the question, you can think about it for a second yourself. What is the link between Apollo and an email? And the link is pretty easy. The size of the code that was in the computer of Apollo and the LEM was 70K. That's the equivalent of the average size of an email today without an attachment. Of course, we have much more computer capacity, so there's no point at trying to be as small in the code as we needed to be at the time of Apollo. But nevertheless, we are using tons of automatic code generators for the website. So we are using also equivalent of automatic code generators. We are looking at no-code applications now in the cloud, etc. Those are actually very big in terms of underlying information and the underlying code. And so we have lost the habit to be as efficient as possible from a coding point of view. The same goes about bandwidth and quantity of data that we transfer. Think about Google for a second. At the beginning of Google, for those who've known the early days of Google, they were fighting against Yahoo. Yahoo was a wonderful portal with tons of images and news, etc. And Google came and they had just a white page, as they still have as a homepage, white page with the search location. Guess who won? As you know, it's Google, because simply it was extremely fast to go onto their page, type the question that you had, and get an answer. And very fast it became more accurate. The type of answers that they got were more accurate than Yahoo, because Yahoo were not only working on their search engine, they were also working on all the other aspects of their portals. So really there you can think about gaining more business. And the example that you have above is the Deutsche Bahn, so equivalent of SNCB and MBS in Belgium. The three screens that you have give the same basic functionality: finding a train schedule and buying your train ticket. And the difference between the three is the size in terms of quantity of data that you need to transfer to have that screen. So the biggest one on the left is the one that all the marketing likes, really love, because you can also have a hotel room or a car, etc. It's full of additional advertisement, but it's very heavy to load. The one in the middle is probably the good solution in between, because it loads pretty fast. If you're in the middle of nowhere on your smartphone and you need to find the train schedule, you will be very happy to have that one instead of the heavy one. And just for the sake of it, the lightest possible one on the same interface is on the right. And so this one is 700 times lighter than the heaviest one. It gives you an idea of, do you really need to have everything, all the videos, etc., that you may have on a page where you actually want only to buy a train ticket? To the point that in France, SNCF, they had all the market of all the train tickets a few years ago, and one company, I think it's called Captain Train, or they changed their name recently. They created an interface, very simple interface, without anything else than just, as shown here, finding the schedule and buying a train ticket. And in a few years, they went from 0% to almost 40% of all the train tickets sold in France. It's amazing that people don't go to SNCF anymore. They go to the easiest one, quickest one, that just does the same thing, sells at the same price, but without, and thank you, someone, Miguel answers, Captain Train changed it into Train Line. So there, just for information. So there's really a business behind being simple, being fast in IT as well. And this can be proven also by major companies. I'll take just the top example of LinkedIn. They were growing so fast that they needed to build a new data center very often, actually. And it would completely ruin their business because it was too expensive to do that. So instead, they completely reviewed the whole infrastructure, the whole architecture of their systems on the client side, so on your smartphone or laptop, as well as on the server side. They reviewed everything, and in total, they divided their infrastructure need by 112. Actually, it's roughly divided by 30 in terms of servers and multiplied in terms of number of users they could support. But nevertheless, 112 in total is just massive division. And that, of course, allowed them not to build data centers. And I've got other examples like that. One not so long ago with a major well, let's call them a Decathlon. They were facing exactly the same type of issue for something completely different, and they were looking at building a new data center. And by conceiving differently their applications, they've been able to reduce their needs there. Of course, the only original reason to do it is to cut their cost, but the impact, the environmental impact, is massive as well. So if you can link the two together, it's really good in terms of responsibility of companies. Of course, two bad examples, and I move on pretty fast there. The Bitcoin, one Bitcoin transaction you can see on the left, and on the right you see 100,000 Visa transactions in terms of energy usage. And the second example is the AI. When you create an AI, artificial intelligence model, you need to train it, and you can see that the emissions are 5 times higher for the latest, one of the latest ones. It's 5 times higher than a car on the total lifetime of a car. It's just massive. So do we really need to go there? It's a question that we can ask. The same for Bitcoins. Do we need to do all the Bitcoin transactions or not? Best practices. Many of them are technical, of course. There's a nice book, but in French only. It's a very small book. I think it's 12 euro, something like that. So it's not a massive investment. And it gives you 115 best practices. They look like these little fish, technical information, giving you different information, very easy to read. There are various tools. We give training certification supported by France. I mentioned already the collective greenit.fr. So these are all the people who are volunteering to help the community. Eco-index, I've shown you for the VRT website. And then one more tool, for example, Ecometer, this one for RTL. They look at 15 of the 115 best practices that you can see in the green book. They look at the top 15 and they tell you if you pass yes or no for your page. And then you have more details than what you can see here, but I invite you to test it for your own website if you want. Of course, the question of the website is only important if you have a lot of traffic. In my case, I've got barely no traffic on Green IT Belgium. Everything goes onto LinkedIn. So for me, or if you have a company where most of your information is not exchanged through your website, it's not very important for you to have such a decent website. But if you have as much traffic, for example, as VRT, RTL, or Facebook, etc., there the impact can be really massive. As an end user, what can you do? And I've added just a top note there. What we try when we work with companies is to have training organized within companies, because it changes the way users are working inside, but it also helps at home. They will explain that to their kids, family, friends, etc. The first step, probably you've heard everywhere, delete your old emails. We'll come to that, but the very first step is really about the life of your devices. Try to buy less if possible. Try not to renew your TV at every football World Cup or something like that. Really think about, do you need to enlarge the screen? Do you need to have 4K, 8K? Will you see the difference? When you buy Internet of Things, when you buy camera, etc., think about the way it's used. It can really have a big impact. The second one is about video streaming. Much more important than emails is the video streaming. Around 80% of the bandwidth, mobile bandwidth, but it becomes the same on the landline bandwidth, 80% of the bandwidth is taken by video streaming. So to reduce it, you can lower the definition of what you are looking at. And actually, you probably heard that because of the COVID-19 and everyone working from home, YouTube and Netflix have been requested to lower the standard definition for all their users. So that's one step that you can take, and try as much as possible to avoid watching it on 4G, for example, in the train or something like that. It does not mean that you cannot watch a movie in the train, but download it before leaving home. You will divide your impact by 2 to 3 in terms of energy consumption in total between you and the servers. Okay, so it's not about stopping you from using your devices, etc. It's about knowing how to reduce these impacts. Virtual waste. Well, I just mentioned 3G, 4G. Try to reduce the usage. Anything like newsletters, if you receive tons of newsletters that you just dump every time, unsubscribe from them. There are tools to unsubscribe. I would not recommend them too much because the privacy aspect of these tools is very low. But nevertheless, if you just unsubscribe every time you receive a new type of newsletters, after a few weeks, you will see a big decrease already. An ad blocker is a possibility for the website. It blocks ads from loading, so that's also something good. And then a small tip, type the URL in full. What do I mean there? If you're going to Facebook or something like that, don't type Facebook in the URL bar, type facebook.com. Not just Green IT Belgium, but greenitbelgium.be. Why? If you look at the searches, the most frequent searches on Google, the 5 top ones are Facebook, YouTube, Google, Gmail, and Hotmail. Simply because people don't type the .com. And so they end up on Google, where they click on the link to Facebook, etc. Of course, you can type it in full if you know it. You can save it in your favorites. And if it's something that you use regularly, it will appear when you type the beginning of the URL. It will the rest of it will appear. Click on the line where you have the full URL, and you will already avoid going on to Google to be rerouted to something else. Emails, let's come to that. If you want to work on emails, it's very good to delete all the emails if you look at the biggest ones only. But apart from that, it takes so much time to delete the old emails that it's something that I would not recommend as the first action. So if you want to look at old ones, look at biggest ones. Otherwise, try to reduce the number of emails that you send. Don't do reply to all. Really look at how many people you are sending it to. And in the emails, try to avoid images, also in the signatures. Do not send files if possible in the emails. Use, for example, WeTransfer or similar. That there's a lot of similar solutions. Some of them corporate solutions for companies because they do not all allow, for example, WeTransfer or the other ones. But the big advantage there is that the file will only be loaded once at a place. You put the link to that file in your email, and the people who receive the email, only those that need the file will download it. Otherwise, your file will be sent to plenty of email servers, and it will be kept forever until people delete it, and it will be put on backup, etc. On WeTransfer, it stays for 7 days, and then it's deleted. On other solution, it stays for 30 days, and then it's deleted automatically. So big advantage, you load it only once, it's not replicated everywhere, and only the people who need it actually download it. Last small hint and tip here for today for end users, your usage of the cloud. When you transfer data anywhere but to the cloud, the energy usage is at least the same as storing it locally for 1 year. So, or in the cloud for 1 year. So really think, do I need to transfer something to the cloud? For example, if you have done pictures during your day, you can delete them before going home. You can delete those that you don't need, that you don't want to keep, etc., because then they will not synchronize you to your cloud. Okay, so every picture that you do not upload to your cloud, you are saving the equivalent of 1 to 2 years of storage of energy. Now, the cloud can be really useful if you use it for example, to avoid sending emails and work together on certain files. Collaboration through the cloud can be very effective. So it's about responsible usage of the cloud. It's not about not using the cloud. There's a question there, what about 5G? I will not go too much in this one. It's a very sensitive one, and the amount of study about 5G is the amount of correct study with sufficient peer review, etc., is still fairly low. There's a lot of discussions about the fact that it's probably consuming much more, and especially it will force us all. The real impact of 5G for me is that it will force the installation of tens of thousands or probably millions of antennas, and it will force us all to replace our smartphones again, smartphone, tablets, etc. That is the biggest problem. If I look just at what I've said today, all the other aspects on nature, etc., I'm afraid I can't give a decent information today, because simply for me, the information that is circulating is not reliable at this stage yet. So you can actually leverage your IT services also for your competitivity, not just for the planet. Of course, it's essential to do it for the planet, but what am I meaning by competitivity aspect there? The first one is the European Commission. So they started an initiative, it's called Digital Europe. Be careful if you look for Digital Europe, because it's also a lobbying group from IT providers. But actually, it is used within the European Commission as a name, Digital Europe, and they have an initiative. Among other initiatives, one of them is especially to make ICT products, or IT products and services, sustainable. I will show you a lot of text, but I will only highlight the ones that you need to read today. So it's about energy efficient ICT and carbon neutral ICT, and especially they will prioritize the development of the products and services that have a proven overall minimum footprint. That means that they will give a financial advantage to the providers of software and hardware that have lower emissions. How can they do that? Simply by changing the way they buy their equipment and software, etc., and by recommending to all the major companies, etc., to adapt their purchasing policies. So there's a potential financial impact directly there. The second thing is about preparing for that. They are looking mainly at creating transparency about not only the products, like you have your fridge today, you know if it's A plus, etc. You may have something similar with some labels for computers today or screens. We don't have it at all for services today. If you go on a website, if you go on a web banking site, you have no idea of the footprint that it has, not only for carbon footprint, but also all the underlying footprint, like for example, the number of servers that are needed to run it, so all the natural resources. And that is really something on which Europe wants to work, is to provide an equivalent fact sheet for each of the digital services that you provide. And I mentioned web banking, so it's not just about IT companies. It's really about any company using IT to deliver a service. There may be an impact for you. Of course, it won't apply immediately in 2021, 2022, especially with the delays that we are taking now with the coronavirus. But being ready before the others is a good way to prepare for competition. I will not, there's a question about the WWW as an old architecture compared to more efficient ways to do the web. I will not go into these details today. I'm afraid we'll keep that for another discussion if you want, and especially with more technical experts. If you need an answer to that one, don't hesitate to contact me separately. So many companies are using the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations now to define their CSR strategy. What we can see, so there's 17 goals in total. Out of those 17, 9 can be acted upon through IT. Parts of it, every time it's only for a part of it, but let's say that your company has decided to work on number 4, 5, and 9. Well, you can pick and choose some of the objectives there. The big advantage is that you can transform the information from these objectives into tangible objectives for your staff, actually. So we can help you if you want to use these sustainable development goals in IT to transform that into objectives for your teams, your staff. So in short, quick summary of what I've just said. Green IT, it's really strategic. It helps you reduce costs. It can help you improve user experience. You remember Google and Yahoo. Recruitment and retention, there's more and more people who are looking at their employer, and especially the younger generation are not willing to work for employers that are not active for the environment. And in IT, it's very difficult not to, to prove that you're actually doing something for the environment. Legislation I mentioned, the CSR, and then comes the network that we created through Green IT Belgium. So my last slide will be on what are the next steps then if you want to be part of the club. Actually, the first one that we propose when you join the club, we propose to measure your ecological footprint and also the maturity of your service, of the management of your IT services from an ecological or environmental point of view. So we measure you against 65 best practices for the maturity aspect, and we run based on an inventory on the footprint, and through that we can measure your footprint. Then we can benchmark you against all the major companies that already did it. That helps you to understand where are your weaknesses compared to the competition, not especially only the competition, but companies at large, and we can have some variations within that. And the big advantage is not so much on the competition side, but mainly on the exchange. What we see with all these companies is that for the green IT aspect, they are really willing to explain what they've done, how they implemented some parts of their green IT strategy, and each of them will have different things to implement. Some of them it will be about printing, some of them will be about extending the life of the equipment, some of them will be about the way they code and develop, etc. So for each of them we have different peers who can provide experience, and of course we have then possibility to define an action plan, provide training, certifications. There are possibilities to have a label also at company level, and then communication about companies like we are doing today in these presentations. And so we would be happy to have you join the club, where you can see already Belfius Luminus, the Croix-Rouge de Belgique, not yet the other side of the country, RTL, Belgium, SIP, the Clinic of Cotigny, and the French Institute Numérique Responsable as members already. So in case you want to follow us, don't hesitate. You can follow us on LinkedIn mainly. You can reach out by email, and don't hesitate to call me. You've got my direct number there. That's it for me at the moment. We haven't had too many questions left, so I'll go through the two. There's one which was too big for me to read while I was speaking, so I've kept it for now. I'll read it for you. I imagine that the impact data you showed for user equipment is mainly driven by the greater use of plastics, which are in green. Actually, not so much by plastic only. There's a part of plastic, but more and more manufacturers are using recycled plastics for IT, and a bigger chunk, bigger proportion of different types of recycled plastic. The biggest part of the impact comes. Plastic is a side product of petrol. So whether we use plastic or not, there's actually an impact of extracting petrol. The biggest impact comes from the metals, and especially the rare earths. Rare earths, rare metals are not rare in the sense that there's not a lot on the planet. There's actually plenty of places where you can find rare earth. But the thing is that the percentage of rare metal within a rock is extremely small. So you need to extract tons of rocks to extract a few grams of some of the components that you need for computers. To give you an idea, when you build 1 ton of car, you need to extract 54 tons of natural resources in total, 54 for one. When you build 1 ton of computer, you need to extract 100 tons of natural resources. When you build 1 ton of computer processor, you need to extract 16,000 tons of natural resources. So the impact really comes from this extraction. That's where it is. But of course, there are various types of progress made on the extraction. The way to extract a resource is the way to recuperate, to recycle as well. This said, the recycling is unfortunately very bad actually in the electronic equipment. We always hear fairly good numbers for like zinc, gold, etc. Actually, if you've got gold coming from, I don't know, anything which is almost fully gold, it's very easy to recuperate. But when it's within a processor, all these metals are so I can't come to the word anymore. But anyway, the mix is so tight that it becomes extremely difficult to extract at a sufficient pure level the different metals. So we can't recycle at a good level the electronic. If we recycle metals from electronic, it is used for something else, but it is not pure enough to go back into electronics at the moment. Second one that I see there, it's strange that the waste tax is paid upfront by the consumer. No, that's a good question that I can't really answer. Actually, it's fairly logical because we are the user. So if we use, we pollute. If we don't buy, we don't pollute. We don't pay the tax. So there's a logic behind. Now that the tax that we have in Belgium is not so much about the recycling. It's about getting mainly statistics about the collection, much more about statistics than actually about the full processing behind. But that is a completely different story. The tax that we pay on waste is very, very low. Still, it's a very small amount compared to the impact that it has on the planet overall. So I can't really discuss argument too much on that professionally, at least. I can do it personally, but that's a different question. To borrow money from the financial markets, it seems easier to be green. Any view on this? Actually, that's true. There are various, how do you call that, indicators, like you have credit ratings from Standard & Poor's, etc., that you may know of. There are equivalent indicators, ESG indicators for environmental, societal, and governance indicators, given by these institutions as well. And so if you have a better rating, a better ESG rating, your credit rating becomes better. And so, for example, I was discussing with one of the responsible at Société Générale, And so for a bank who need to borrow tons of money on the capital markets, getting a better ESG rating is crucial. It's only a minor, it's a point of something, but even that makes millions of difference in interest rates that they pay. And so the Green IT for them is really strategic. The Green IT director at Societe Generale has direct access to the CEO of Societe Generale because of the financial impact that it has for them to do that correctly. So yes, there is clearly an advantage, at least, at doing it, very clearly. How would you motivate people to buy less equipment? Green tax. I'm to a certain extent, unfortunately, yes, probably, because it's usually taxes that can make a difference. But I'm not personally so much in favor of punishment. The first thing, I think, it's education. If people don't know about the impact, they can't act. The same as I mentioned, for example, for using 4G, for you watching your video versus downloading it before leaving home. So the first thing I think is about giving the information to people, as I'm trying to do today. That is probably the biggest step that we can make. The second one is about creating a real value to the reuse of equipment. So the companies that I mentioned, like a Smart World, Comex, etc., the more we start buying from those, the more it creates a real economical value, a real market, and that can reduce the amount of new equipment that we need to manufacture. At least hopefully a part of it. Apart from that, it's difficult to say. Then it will probably be a question of laws, at least, if not taxes. It can be laws because, for example, the European Union is working at forcing the manufacturers to extend the warranty period of the equipment. You have to know that, for example, in France, up to a few years ago, it was 6 months, the legal warranty, while in Belgium, it was 2 years already. Just by transforming it into 1 year and then 2 years, it made already an enormous difference in France in the rate of replacement of the equipment. And there are discussions about pushing the legal limit to 5 years in Europe, and also forcing all the manufacturers to provide the possibility to repair up to 10 years. So warranty 5 years and possibility to repair up to 10 years. Now, of course, there's all the lobbies. And to give you a big example of the strength of the lobbies, there's a battery directive, and the battery directive foresees that for your iPhone, you must be able to replace it yourself. I would be really keen to know if you have replaced yourself the battery of your iPhone or smartphone, Samsung or whatever recently. It's very difficult. How is that? Simply because the two main manufacturers have made an enormous lobby when the directive was created. And the directive ended up having a small additional sentence saying it is mandatory that the end user can replace the battery himself, except if in the country the manufacturer provides a service to replace the battery. Of course, it doesn't say that the service will be against payment. So that is where there is a risk that the lobbies can block the initiatives that we are trying to push to reduce the impact of environmental impact of IT. You speak about a warranty of 5 years, but how long should we use a device like a PC or smartphone in order for it to be sustainable? Well, my PC is a bit more than 6 years old, but my previous one is used by my son. It's 9 years old, not my son, but the PC. And the previous one is still running fine, but I had to put it on Ubuntu. And this one is 12 years old. So it's possible, if you're just a bit careful with your equipment, you can keep it for quite long. I would say for a laptop, 5 to 6 years, especially at company level, would already be a massive change compared to today. Some places, even at the European Commission, in some cases, are replacing their laptops every 2 years. Very often it's 3 years, rarely 4 years, and even more rarely 5 years. So going to 5 years for a laptop would already be nice. Smartphones, apparently we are replacing the smartphones every 18 to 22 months in Belgium and in France. Pushing it to 3 years would already help a lot, and nevertheless, it works still fine after 4 years, for example. But it depends on well, if we push the manufacturers and the software providers, etc., to force them to be able to still use a computer after that. Just one note on that. In the most of the new contracts coming from major companies active in Green IT, there are new features. For example, if you try to buy a software, in the RFP sent to software providers, there's a request to confirm that the software will still run in 5 years' time on the computer that you have today in the company. So that is really about, from a software perspective, making sure that the hardware will still function, will still be acceptable for the software. Okay, so that is the kind of thing that you can put in a contract, and the suppliers answer yes or no. But if they answer no, they've got less points and less chances of being taken as provider. How do you deal with planned obsolescence of most electrical equipment? So at personal level, you can do quite a lot. There's very good websites like iFixit, tons of videos where you can learn to replace stuff and fight against planned obsolescence yourself. Now at European level, we are working with the collective Green IT, with the Institut Numérique Responsable, etc. We are trying to push their directives to work against planned obsolescence. There's a lot which is being done already on general electrical equipment, and it is now being pushed at electronic level, where it takes more time because people need to understand the problematic behind, and they need to be informed against all the greenwashing that may come from manufacturers there. Thank you for all the questions. That's good. I'm going through the next one. Windows 7 is not supported anymore, which had a major impact on PC sales, which are now booming, where the market was slack beforehand. Any rule to make about it? Good question. Actually, it was the same before with Windows, the version before, how was it called again? Almost no company migrated to that. And so for a few years, actually the number of the average year of PCs, average lifetime of PCs extended in companies because the companies were not upgrading to the latest version of Windows. And then they went to Windows 7, so it started again. And as you say now, with Windows 7 not being supported anymore, it's still working, but it's not supported anymore, so people have replaced. It's a question of duration of a software or an operating system. So yeah, it goes in the laws that we are trying to push and directives. I see that Miguel is telling me that we are a bit too long, so I think that we'll end for today.
Yes, thank you very much, Olivier. Thank you for this insightful webinar. I think there are definitely takeaways that we can put in our life. For me, the URL thing and the WeTransfer are definitely actionable tasks I can put into place. I think it's really interesting to see that as consumers, we have an impact in what, for example, we eat and how we move around transport, but also in the way we consume IT. So thank you very much for this insightful webinar. I encourage you to give feedback. So you have the QR code on the slide that you can see, where you can scan it and it will direct you to the feedback form. And don't miss the webinar next Thursday as well. And I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. See you soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Olivier.